The shepherd found her sleeping in his hay barn on the coldest morning of early autumn, curled between two bales with her arms wrapped around herself and frost glittering on her dark hair. She woke when his shadow fell across her face and scrambled upright so fast she knocked her head against the wooden beam above. Her green skin looked pale in the dawn light, almost gray, and her small tusks clicked together as her jaw trembled. She was young, maybe 19 or 20, with pointed ears that lay flat against her skull in fear. "I will go," she said immediately. "I did not steal anything. I will go now." The shepherd, whose name was James Irwin, and who had lived alone on this hillside farm for 6 years since his father died, looked at her thin frame and the worn patches on her clothes and the way her hands shook. He was 32, tall and lean from hard work, with brown hair that fell across his forehead and eyes the color of slate. People in the valley said he was as talkative as a stone and twice as warm. "Can you work with sheep?" he asked. She blinked. Her eyes were amber, striking against her green skin. "Yes, I can work. Need help with lambing season. Winter's coming early this year." He turned toward the barn door. "Come on, breakfast first." She followed him across the yard to the small stone farmhouse, her steps hesitant, her gaze darting to the gate as if measuring the distance to run. The kitchen was simple and clean, with a fire already burning in the hearth. James pulled out a chair at the wooden table. "Sit." She sat on the very edge of the chair, spine straight, hands folded in her lap. He put bread and butter and eggs and bacon on the table, more food than she had seen in weeks. Her eyes fixed on it with an intensity that made his chest tight. "Eat," he said. She reached for the bread slowly, as if expecting him to pull it away. When he didn't, she ate with careful control, trying not to seem desperate even though he could tell she was starving. He ate his own portion in silence, watching her from the corner of his eye. When she finished, she folded her hands again and waited. "What is your name?" he asked. "Sera Wolfridge. I am James. You can stay in the small room off the kitchen. Work starts at dawn. Supper is at sunset." He paused, seeing the way she was already calculating, already preparing herself for whatever payment he would demand. "You don't have to earn your meals here." She looked at him blankly. The words seemed to pass through her without meaning. After a moment she nodded anyway. "Yes, sir." "I understand." But she did not understand. She did not understand at all. That first day she worked until her hands bled. James found her in the upper pasture after dark, still mending fence posts by moonlight. He had to physically take the hammer from her grip. "Day's done," he said. "There are 3 more posts," she said. Her voice was hoarse. "They will be there tomorrow." At supper she ate quickly and efficiently, then immediately stood to clear the dishes. He caught her wrist gently. "Sit." "Rest." She sat, but she did not rest. She perched on the edge of the chair with her muscles coiled, ready to spring up the moment he needed something. He ignored it and cleaned the dishes himself, and she watched him with that same blank confusion. Over the next week, a pattern emerged. She woke before him every morning, no matter how early he rose. She worked through the day without stopping except when he made her. She never asked for anything. She never complained. At meals she ate exactly what he gave her, no more, no less, and always looked faintly surprised when the food appeared. The other farmhands from neighboring properties would sometimes stop by to trade news or borrow tools. They stared at Sera with open suspicion. Some made comments James pretended not to hear. One, a man named Thomas Fletcher from the next valley over, pulled James aside after seeing Sera working in the sheep pen. "You know what you have got there," Thomas said, jerking his chin toward Sera. "A good worker," James said flatly. "An orc." "There are laws, James. Old laws maybe, but still on the books. She is working for room and board. Nothing illegal in that," Thomas snorted. Room and board, that what you call it. People will talk, they already are. James's jaw tightened. Let them talk. After Thomas left, James found Sera standing very still beside the barn. Her ears were pricked forward. She had heard every word. Get back to work, James said quietly. She nodded and moved away, but he saw the new tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes flicked toward the road more often. The seasons on the high hills moved fast. By the end of the first month, frost came every morning and the sheep needed to be brought down from the upper pastures. James and Sera worked together, moving the flock through the narrow mountain paths. She was good with the animals, patient and calm. The sheep trusted her faster than they had ever trusted him. One afternoon they lost a lamb in a ravine. James climbed down to get it, but the rocks were slick with moss and his foot slipped. He caught himself on a root, but pain shot through his ankle. Sera was beside him in seconds, impossibly fast, bracing him with her shoulder. I can climb, she said. Tell me where. He told her. She went down the ravine like she had been born to it, retrieved the bleeding lamb and brought it back up without hesitation. When they returned to the farmhouse, his ankle was swelling badly. He tried to walk on it and nearly fell. Sera caught him again. This time she did not ask. She simply put his arm over her shoulder and half carried him inside. She made him sit while she wrapped his ankle with strips of cloth soaked in cold water. Her hands were surprisingly gentle. You should rest, she said. There is work to do. I will do it. And she did. For 3 days while his ankle healed, she did everything. She fed the sheep, mended the fences, hauled water, cooked meals. She worked from before dawn until after dark. On the 3rd night, James hobbled out to the barn and found her mucking out stalls by lantern light. Sera, stop. She turned, eyes wide. Did I do something wrong? No. You did everything right. That is the problem. He took the pitchfork from her. You will work yourself to death. I am earning my keep, she said, and there was something desperate in her voice. I told you, you don't have to earn your meals here. She stared at him. In the lantern light, her face was all sharp shadows. Everyone has to earn their meals. Not here. Then why do you feed me? The question hung between them. James did not know how to answer it. Because you were starving. Because I have food to spare. Because I am tired of being alone. None of those felt like the whole truth. Because you are here, he said finally. It was a poor answer. He saw that in the way she turned away, in the set of her shoulders. She did not believe him. She went back to the work, and he was not strong enough yet to stop her. By the 2nd month, winter arrived in earnest. Snow fell thick and heavy, covering the pastures in white. The sheep huddled in the barn, and the farmhouse became an island in a sea of ice. James and Sera were trapped together, day after day, with only each other for company. She still worked constantly. She cooked, cleaned, tended the animals, split firewood. He watched her move through the house like a ghost, always busy, never still. One evening he came in from checking the sheep and found her darning his shirts by the fire. There was a pile of them beside her, all his old work shirts, and she was bent over them with a needle and thread. You don't need to do that, he said. They have holes. I know. I can mend them. I am better at it. That was probably true. Her stitches were small and even, far neater than his own rough work. He sat down across from her and watched her hands move in the firelight. She had calluses on her fingers from the needle, from the tools, from everything. Where did you learn to sew? He asked. She did not look up. My mother taught me before. Before what? Her hands stilled. For a long moment she was silent. Then she said very quietly, before the raid. Before the men came and burned our village and killed everyone who fought back. Before I ran. James felt something crack open in his chest. How long have you been running? 2 years, maybe 3, I lost count. She resumed sewing, her movements mechanical. I worked where I could, farms mostly. They would give me food for labor, sometimes a place to sleep if I worked hard enough, sometimes not. Is that why you think you have to earn your meals? That is how it works. You work, you eat. You stop working, you starve. She said it like a law of nature, like gravity or sunrise. That is not how it works here. Then I do not understand how it works here. James leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He was not good with words, never had been. His father had been the same way, a man who spoke in grunts and gestures. But he tried. You work because the work needs doing. I feed you because you are part of this household. Those are separate things. Sera's hand stopped again. She looked at him directly for the first time in weeks, her amber eyes searching his face for the lie. She did not find it, but she did not believe him either. Why? She asked. Why what? Why would you do that? What do you gain? He could not explain it. Could not put into words the way the farmhouse felt less empty with her in it, the way her quiet presence had become as necessary as breath. So he said nothing, and after a moment she went back to her sewing. The winter deepened. Snow piled against the walls, and the wind howled through the mountain passes. They were cut off from the valley completely. It was just the two of them, and the sheep, and the endless white silence. James began to notice small things. The way Sera hummed softly when she thought he could not hear. The way she saved scraps for the barn cats and pretended she had not. The way she smiled, just a little, when a lamb nursed for the first time. He also noticed the way she flinched when he moved too quickly. The way she positioned herself near exits. The way she ate like someone who expected the plate to be snatched away. She was waiting for the trap to spring, waiting for him to demand payment of another kind. He realized with cold clarity that she had been waiting since the first day, and the longer he did not demand it, the more confused and frightened she became. One night he found her in the kitchen after supper, scrubbing the floor on her hands and knees. It was already clean. She was scrubbing it again. Sera, stop. She did not stop. Sera, I need to finish, she said, her voice tight. It is clean. It has been clean for an hour. It needs to be cleaner. He knelt beside her and took the brush from her hands. She resisted for a moment, then let go. Her hands were red and raw. Why are you doing this? He asked. I have to, she whispered. If I stop, if I do not work hard enough, you will send me away. You will stop feeding me. You will realize I am not worth it. That is not going to happen. You do not know that. You could wake up tomorrow and decide you are done. Everyone always does. I have to work hard enough that you will not. James looked at her, at this fierce, frightened girl who had survived horrors he could barely imagine, and felt anger burn in his throat. Not at her. At the world that had taught her this. At every person who had made her believe her worth was measured in labor. Listen to me, he said. You are not going to be sent away. I am not going to stop feeding you. You are staying here because I want you here, not because of the work, because of you. Sera's breath hitched. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she scrubbed them away angrily with the back of her hand. I do not understand, she said. I know, but it is still true. He stood and pulled her to her feet. Her hands were shaking. He wrapped them in his own, covering the raw skin, the calluses, the evidence of her endless effort. Go to bed, he said gently. The floor is clean enough. She went, but he knew she did not believe him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The next morning he woke to find her gone. For one terrible moment he thought she had run, had finally given in to her fear and fled into the snow. Then he saw her through the window, already outside, already working, her breath steaming in the freezing air. He wanted to drag her back inside. He wanted to make her understand. But he knew it would not work. Words had failed, so he tried something else. There was a lamb born that week, small and sickly. It would not nurse from its mother. James brought it into the house and set up a pen by the fire. Sera immediately took over its care, feeding it with a rag dipped in milk, warming it with blankets. She stayed up through the night, checking on it every hour. The lamb survived. It grew stronger, began to walk, began to bleat for her whenever she entered the room. On the 5th day, James said, "We should name her." Sera looked up from where she was bottle feeding the lamb. "Name her. She is yours. You saved her. She is not mine. She is yours. This is your farm. Then I am giving her to you." Sera's eyes went wide. "I cannot accept that. Too late." "Already done." James leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "She needs a name." "I do not know any names." "Then I will name her. I will call her Sera." She stared at him. "You cannot name a lamb after me. Why not? It is strange. I am a strange man." That startled a small laugh out of her, quickly stifled. But he had heard it, and something warm spread through his chest. From that day on, the lamb followed Sera everywhere. It bleated when she left the room. It slept at the foot of her bed. Sera tried to maintain her usual careful distance, but James saw the way she softened when the lamb nuzzled her hand, the way she smiled when it pranced around her feet. He also started leaving small things for her. A pair of wool socks that had been his mother's, cleaned and mended. A shawl he had bought from a traveling merchant years ago and never used. He did not give them to her directly. He just left them in her room and said nothing. She wore the socks. She wrapped the shawl around her shoulders on cold evenings. She never thanked him, but he did not need her to. By the 3rd month, the worst of winter had passed. The snow began to melt, revealing muddy ground and the first hints of green. The passes opened enough that travelers could get through again. That was when Thomas Fletcher returned, and this time he brought someone with him. James was in the barn when they arrived. He heard voices in the yard and came out to find Thomas standing with Martin Fletcher, Thomas's older brother, and a man with a reputation for cruelty. Martin was thick-shouldered and red-faced, with a voice that carried across the valley. "There she is," Martin said, pointing at Sera where she stood by the sheep pen. "The orc." James stepped between them and Sera. "What do you want, Martin?" "Come to do my civic duty. You are harboring a vagrant, James, against the law." "She is not a vagrant. She works here." "Orc vagrant." "There is a statute, old one from the war days, says any orc without proper documentation can be arrested for vagrancy. I looked it up." Martin pulled a folded paper from his coat. "I am reporting her to the Reeve." James felt ice in his veins. "That statute is 50 years old. Still law until someone says otherwise, and I intend to see it enforced." Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "Martin, maybe we should just let it go. She is not hurting anyone." "Shut up, Thomas. This is about principle, about keeping our land safe." Martin's eyes gleamed with malicious satisfaction. "The Reeve will be here tomorrow to collect her." They left. James turned to Sera and found her standing very still, her face carefully blank. The little lamb was pressed against her legs. "Pack your things," James said quietly. Sera nodded. She had been expecting this. Of course she had. She went into the house without a word. James followed her. She was in her small room, folding her few possessions with mechanical precision. He stood in the doorway. "You are not leaving," he said. She looked at him. "The Reeve is coming. Then we will deal with the Reeve. I will not let you break the law for me." "I am not breaking any law. That statute is ancient. I doubt it even applies anymore." "You do not know that." "No, but I am going to find out." He crossed the room and took her hand, stopping her frantic packing. "Trust me, please." Sera's eyes searched his face. "Why are you doing this?" He could not find the words. Instead, he pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her thin frame. She stiffened in shock, then slowly, hesitantly, relaxed against him. They stood like that for a long moment, and he felt her heart racing against his chest. "Because you belong here," he said into her hair. "Because I want you to stay, not because of the work, because of you." She pulled back enough to look up at him. Her amber eyes were wet. "I still do not understand." "You will," he promised. That night James rode down to the village through the melting snow. He found the Reeve, a gray-haired woman named Eleanor Calloway, in her office above the trading post. She listened to his story with a frown deepening on her weathered face. "Martin Fletcher," she said with distaste. "That man is a menace. Let me see the statute he is citing." She pulled down a heavy book of laws and flipped through the yellowed pages. James waited, his hands clenched into fists. Finally, Eleanor looked up, found it. Statute 47, enacted during the border wars. Any orc found on settled land without documentation proving free status can be detained as a vagrant. She kept reading, then made a noise of satisfaction. And here we are. Amendment from 20 years ago. Statute 47 declared void and unenforceable due to the Treaty of Westmark. Martin is citing a dead law. Relief flooded through James. So Sera is safe from that particular bit of nastiness, yes. But James, Eleanor's expression turned serious. "Martin will find another way to cause trouble. He always does. Watch yourself." "I will. Thank you, Eleanor. Bring that girl by sometime. I would like to meet her properly." James rode back through the dawn, exhausted but lighter than he had felt in weeks. He found Sera in the kitchen, sitting at the table with the lamb in her lap. She had not slept. She looked up when he entered, her face drawn. "The Reeve will be here this morning," she said. "I know. And she will tell Martin Fletcher to go to hell." He explained what Eleanor had found. Sera listened without speaking, her hands buried in the lamb's wool. When he finished, she just stared at him. "You rode all night," she said slowly, "to save me." "Of course I did." "Why?" That question again. James pulled out the chair across from her and sat down heavily. He was too tired for careful words, too worn down to hide the truth. "Because I love you," he said. The words fell into the silence like stones into a well. Sera's mouth opened slightly. Her tusks caught the morning light. The lamb bleated softly. "You cannot," she whispered. "I do. You do not even know me. I know you hum when you work. I know you save scraps for the barn cats. I know you stayed up 3 nights to save a lamb. I know you are kind and fierce and you work harder than anyone I have ever met. I know you think you have to earn every breath, and I wish I could make you believe you do not." He leaned forward. "I know I want you to stay, not for the lambing season, not for the work, forever." Sera's eyes filled with tears. "I do not know how to believe that." "Then let me prove it." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Stay. Let me show you." She did not answer, but she did not pull her hand away. The Reeve came at midday with Martin and Thomas Fletcher in tow. Martin was already shouting before he dismounted, going on about justice and law and the sanctity of human lands. Eleanor let him finish, her expression carved from granite. "Are you done?" she asked. "I demand you arrest that orc," Martin said, pointing at Sera where she stood beside James. "On what grounds?" Statute 47. That statute was voided 20 years ago by the Treaty of Westmark. It has no legal standing. Martin's face went purple. "That cannot be right. I checked the books." "Then you checked the wrong books. Or you checked the right books and decided to ignore the parts that did not suit you." Eleanor's voice could have cut glass. "This woman is working for room and board on James Irwin's farm. That is entirely legal. If you harass her or James again, I will charge you with disturbing the peace." "Do I make myself clear? This is not over," Martin snarled. "Yes, Martin, it is." Eleanor turned her horse. "James, Sera, good day to you both. Martin, Thomas, you are coming with me. We need to have a conversation about wasting the Reeves' time." They left. Martin shot one last venomous look over his shoulder, but Thomas just looked embarrassed. James felt Sera sag slightly beside him, the tension draining out of her all at once. "It is over," he said quietly. For now. For good. Eleanor will make sure of it. Sera looked up at him. You really rode all night for me? Yes. And you told Eleanor you want me to stay, forever? Yes. She turned away, her arms wrapped around herself. The lamb trotted over and bumped against her legs. She reached down and stroked its head absently. I need to think, she said. James nodded. He went back to work, giving her space. He fed the sheep, checked the fences, repaired a section of roof that had leaked during the last storm. He did not see Sera for the rest of the day. She stayed in the house and he did not disturb her. That evening he came in for supper and found the table set with food, 2 plates, 2 cups. Sera was standing by the fire. She had bathed and braided her dark hair. She was wearing the shawl he had given her. I made stew, she said. It smells good. They sat down. They ate in silence the way they had 100 times before, but this silence felt different, heavier. When they finished, Sera folded her hands on the table and looked at him directly. I need to tell you something, she said. James waited. When I first came here, I thought you would be like the others. I thought you would work me until I collapsed and then throw me out when I was no longer useful. I thought you were lying when you said I did not have to earn my meals. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. I have been waiting for months for you to reveal your real price, for you to demand something I could not give, but you never did, because there is no price. I know that now, or I am starting to know it. She took a shaky breath. I woke up before dawn every day because I was terrified. I worked myself sick because I thought if I stopped, you would send me away. I could not understand why you were kind to me, why you fed me without demanding anything, why you protected me from Martin Fletcher, why you named a lamb after me. Sera, let me finish, please. Her amber eyes were bright with unshed tears. Last night you said you love me, and I did not know what to say because I have never had anyone say that to me, not since my mother died. I did not know people could love someone like me, an orc, a vagrant, someone with nothing to offer. You have everything to offer. I am beginning to believe that, she said quietly, because you have shown me every day in 100 small ways, the socks, the shawl, the lamb, the way you ride all night to save me, the way you never ask for anything in return. She stood up and came around the table to stand in front of him. I do not know if I love you yet. I do not think I remember how to love, but I want to learn, and I want to learn with you. James stood. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears on her green cheeks. That is enough. That is more than enough. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. Can I stay? Yes, for as long as you want. Forever, forever. She kissed him then, tentative and sweet, her tusks pressed gently against his lips. He wrapped his arms around her and held her close, and for the first time since his father died, the farmhouse felt like home. Spring came in earnest after that. The snow melted completely, revealing green grass and wildflowers. The sheep were let out into the pastures, and the lambs ran in joyful circles. Sera's lamb, the little one named after her, grew fat and healthy and still followed Sera everywhere. Sera herself changed too. She still worked hard, but she no longer worked with that desperate, frantic edge. She laughed more. She sang while she cooked. She started to ask for things, small things like honey for her tea or an extra blanket for her bed. Each time James gave her what she asked for without question, she seemed a little more solid, a little more real. They fell into new rhythms. James taught her how to shear the sheep, and she taught him songs from her childhood in a language he did not understand but loved to hear. They worked side by side during the day and sat together by the fire at night. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they were silent. Both felt right. One evening in late spring, James was mending a bridle when Sera came and sat beside him. She had been quieter than usual all day, thoughtful. James, she said, can I ask you something? Anything. When did you know that you loved me?" He set down the bridle and thought about it. "The first morning, when I found you in the barn," her eyes widened. "That is impossible. You did not even know me." "I knew enough. I knew you were alone and cold and scared. I knew you needed help. I knew I wanted to be the one to help you." He smiled slightly. "And then I got to know you and I loved you more every day. The way you saved that lamb, the way you hum when you cook, the way you are so fierce and so gentle at the same time. I loved all of it." Sera looked down at her hands. "I think I love you too. I am not completely sure because I do not have anything to compare it to. But when you are near, I feel safe. When you smile at me, I feel warm. When you touch me, I want to be closer. Is that love?" "Yes," James said softly. "That is love." She smiled and it transformed her face. "Good. I was hoping it was." Summer arrived, and with it came the shearing. James hired 2 men from the valley to help, and they worked for 3 long weeks cutting wool from the sheep. The men were wary of Sera at first, but she won them over with her competence and her cooking. By the time they left, they were calling her by name and promising to return next year. After they left, Sera stood in the yard and watched them go down the mountain road. James came to stand beside her. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I have never stayed anywhere long enough to see people a second time," she said. "That I have never had anyone promise to come back. They will, and you will be here when they do." She turned to him. "How do you know I will still be here?" "Because you are home," he said simply. Sera's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Yes, I think I am." In midsummer, Alina the Reeve came to visit. She brought news from the valley and a basket of fresh bread. She and Sera sat in the kitchen drinking tea while James worked outside, and when Alina left, she pulled James aside. "That girl is good for you," Alina said. "I have not seen you this alive since before your father died." "She is everything," James said. "Then do not let her go. People like her, who have survived what she has survived, they are rare. Treasure her." "I intend to." Alina rode away, and James went back inside to find Sera kneading bread dough with a thoughtful expression. "Alina likes you," he said. "She is kind. She told me if Martin Fletcher bothers me again to come directly to her. He will not. He is too much of a coward. I hope you are right." Sera punched down the dough with more force than necessary. "But I am not afraid anymore. If he comes, I will face him. I am not running again." James came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You never have to run again." She leaned back against him. "I know." The harvest came, and with it more work. They spent long days bringing in hay and preparing the sheep for winter. Sera worked tirelessly, but now it was with joy instead of fear. She joked with James while they worked. She threw hay at him when he teased her. She was lighter, freer, more herself. One night in late autumn, after the first frost, they were sitting by the fire when Sera said, "I have been here almost a year. I know. That is the longest I have stayed anywhere since my village burned." And she turned to look at him. "And I want to stay forever. But I need to know if that is truly all right. If you really want me here, not just for the work but for me." James took her hands. "Sera, I have wanted you here since the first day. I want you here for the rest of my life. I want to wake up beside you every morning. I want to work beside you every day. I want to sit with you by the fire every night. I want to grow old with you. I want everything with you." "That sounds like a proposal," she said, her voice shaking. "It is." He slid off the chair and knelt in front of her. "Sera Wolfridge, will you marry me?" She stared at him. Tears ran down her cheeks. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He pulled her down into his arms and kissed her, and she kissed him back with all the love she had been learning to feel, all the trust she had been learning to give. They married a month later in Alina's office with 2 witnesses from the village. Sera wore a dress she had sewn herself from fabric. James had bought from a traveling merchant. It was simple and blue, and it made her eyes shine. James wore his best shirt and could not stop smiling. Afterward, they returned to the farm. Their farm now. Sera had stopped calling it James's place and started calling it home. That winter was the coldest in memory. Snow fell for days without stopping. But the farmhouse was warm, the larder was full, and James and Sera were together. They spent long evenings by the fire, talking and laughing and making plans for the spring. One night, Sera said, "Do you remember when you first told me I did not have to earn my meals here?" "Yes." "I did not understand. I thought you were lying or confused or testing me somehow. I thought everyone had to earn their meals. I thought my worth was measured in how much work I could do. And now I understand. You were telling me I had value just for existing, that I did not need to prove myself to deserve food or shelter or kindness, that I was enough just as I was." She looked at him with shining eyes. "It took me months to believe it, but I believe it now." James pulled her close. "Good, because it is true. It has always been true. I know, and I love you for teaching me. I love you too, more than I can say." They sat together in the firelight, wrapped in each other's arms, and outside the wind howled and the snow fell and the world was cold and harsh. But inside, they were warm. Inside, they were home. Spring came again, as it always did. The snow melted, the grass grew green, and the sheep had their lambs. Sera's lamb, now full grown, had a lamb of her own. Sera laughed with delight when she saw it. "A grandmother," she said. "I am a lamb grandmother." James grinned. "What will you name this one?" "Hope," Sera said, then shook her head. "No, that is too obvious. I will call her Dawn, because she was born at sunrise." They worked together through the spring and into the summer, their movements synchronized after a year of partnership. The hired men came back for shearing, greeted Sera warmly, and congratulated them on their marriage. The wool sold well at market. The farm prospered. One evening in midsummer, Sera came to James with a strange expression on her face. He was mending a fence post and looked up when she approached. "What is it?" he asked. "I think I am pregnant," she said. James dropped the hammer. "What? I am not certain, but I think so. I have been sick in the mornings and my body feels different." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Are you happy?" He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around. She laughed and clung to him. "Happy," he said. "I am overjoyed, terrified but overjoyed. Me too." He set her down gently and cupped her face. "Are you scared?" "A little." "I do not remember my own birth. I do not know if orc births are different from human births. I do not know if the baby will be healthy or what people will say." Her voice trembled. "But I want this. I want a family with you." "Then we will figure it out together," James said. "Just like we have figured out everything else." Alina came to visit the next week, and Sera told her the news. Alina immediately began making arrangements, talking about midwives and supplies and what Sera would need. She was practical and reassuring, and by the time she left, Sera was smiling again. The summer passed into autumn, and Sera's belly began to swell. James fussed over her constantly, trying to make her rest, but she refused to stop working entirely. They compromised. She did lighter tasks, and he did the heavy lifting. They prepared the small room off the kitchen, turning it from Sera's bedroom into a nursery. One evening, as they painted the walls a soft yellow, Sera said, "I never thought I would have this. A home, a husband, a baby. I thought I would spend my whole life running." "You are not running anymore," James said. "No, I am home." Winter came, and with it the baby. The birth was long and difficult, but Alina and the midwife were there, and James held Sera's hand through all of it. When the baby finally came, squalling and red-faced, the midwife wrapped him in a blanket and placed him in Sera's arms. He was beautiful. He had James's brown hair and Sera's amber eyes. His skin was a soft green, lighter than Sera's, and he had tiny nubs on his jaw that might grow into tusks someday. "A boy," Sera whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We have a son." James leaned down and kissed her forehead, then the baby's. "What should we name him?" Sera thought for a moment, then smiled. "William, after my father." "William Irwin," James said, testing the name. "It is perfect." They spent the rest of the winter learning how to be parents. William was a loud baby, always hungry, always awake. But he was healthy and strong, and they loved him with a fierceness that surprised them both. One night, when William was a few months old, Sera woke to find the baby crying. She got up to feed him and found James already there, holding William against his shoulder and humming softly. The baby was quieting, his cries turning to whimpers. "You are good at that," Sera said from the doorway. James turned and smiled. "He is easy to love, like his father." James carried William back to the cradle and laid him down gently. Then he came to Sera and wrapped his arms around her. "Are you happy?" he asked. "More than I ever thought possible," Sera said. "I have everything I ever wanted and things I did not even know I could want. A home, a family, a man who loves me. I am so happy it scares me sometimes. Do not be scared. This is real. This is ours. And it is not going anywhere." She rested her head against his chest and listened to his heartbeat. "I know. I finally know." Spring came again, and with it new life. The sheep had their lambs, the fields turned green, and William grew bigger and stronger every day. Sera and James worked side by side as they always had, but now with William strapped to Sera's back or napping in a basket nearby. The hired men returned for shearing and were delighted to meet William. They passed him around gently, marveling at his tiny hands and his big eyes. One of them, an older man named Peter, said to Sera, "You have built a good life here. You should be proud." "I am," Sera said. "Every day." That summer, Martin Fletcher died. They heard the news from a trader passing through. Apparently, he had fallen from his horse while drunk and hit his head. Thomas came to the farm a week later to apologize. "I am sorry for what my brother did," Thomas said, standing awkwardly in the yard. "He was a bitter man, and he took it out on people who did not deserve it. I should have stood up to him." Sera looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "I accept your apology, but it is done now. Let it be done." Thomas left, and James asked, "Are you really all right?" "Yes. I do not forgive him, but I do not hate him either. He is just part of the past, and the past does not have power over me anymore." More years passed. William grew into a bright, curious boy who loved the sheep and followed his parents everywhere. Sera and James talked about having more children, but it did not happen. They were content with the family they had. One autumn evening, when William was 5, Sera and James were sitting on the porch watching him play with the sheep. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. "You remember," Sera said, "when you told me I did not have to earn my meals here. I remember. I think I finally understand what you meant, not just with my head, but with my heart." She took his hand. "You were telling me I was worthy of love just for being alive, that I did not have to prove myself or work myself to death or be anything other than who I was. You were telling me I belonged." "You do belong, you always have. I know, and I love you for showing me that, for giving me a home, for giving me a family, for giving me a life." She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "Thank you." James kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for staying, for trusting me, for building this life with me." They sat together as the sun set and the stars came out, and William chased sheep through the twilight, and the farmhouse glowed with warmth behind them. This was home. This was family. This was love. And Sera, who had spent years running and hiding and working herself to the bone just to survive, finally understood what it meant to simply live. She understood that she was worthy, not because of what she could do, but because of who she was. She understood that love was not transactional, that kindness did not require repayment, that she belonged here in this place with this man and this child. She understood, after all those months of confusion and fear, what James had been trying to tell her from the very beginning. You do not have to earn your meals here. You do not have to earn your place. You do not have to earn love. You are already enough, and she was. She finally, truly was.